Financial freedom is a great goal to have, but without a plan of how to get there, it's really just a dream. In this episode, we talk about analyzing your current financial situation, which is the first step that you need to take in order to achieve financial freedom.
Are you a working professional but struggling to balance the workload of your career, family, obligations, and preparing for your financial future? If so, this podcast is for you. You've spent years learning your craft, and now it's time to focus on your financial future. This podcast will teach you what you need to retire wealthy and happy. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of Retire Wealthy and Happy. In this episode, we're going to continue talking about foundational information of getting out of the rat race and obtaining financial freedom. Today, we're going to be focusing on analyzing your current financial situation and understanding really how long it's going to take to become financially free. Now, last week, we talked about the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Robert Kiyosaki does a great job of defining what assets and liabilities are and what you need to do or what you need to focus on in order to get out of the rat race and become financially free.
So, Ben, do you think it's really that easy? What does Robert Kiyosaki say about different people's career choices and how that affects their financial freedom?
You know, Roger, that's a great question. And last week we talked about the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki also has another book that's called The Cash Flow Quadrant. And I'm going to attempt to explain this on the audio here. When you think about a quadrant, it's really just four sections. And the four sections that he defines in the cash flow quadrant, think of the letters E, S, B, and I. And I'm going to try to explain each of these. So the E in the upper left-hand corner stands for employee. The S in the bottom left-hand corner stands for self-employed. In the upper right-hand corner, we have a B, which stands for business owner. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we have an I, which stands for investor. So let's talk about each of these individually. So an employee, pretty easy to understand. An employee is somebody who goes to work for somebody else. You might call this a 9-to-5 job, working Monday to Friday, 40 hours a week. That's an employee. They get paid a regular wage. Maybe they get paid every 2 weeks. It's a pretty easy to understand mentality or career choice, we should say. Now, bottom left-hand corner is a self-employed individual. This might be, it could be a doctor, a dentist, an attorney, maybe a salesperson, somebody who goes out and works for themselves. They can have the opportunity to make a lot more money because however much time they're willing to put in, they can make whatever money they can during that amount of time. But the thing about a self-employed individual and an employee is if they're not working, if they're not putting in their time, then they're not earning any money. So now we're going to switch to the other side, which is the B and the I quadrants. A B stands for business owner. Now, as a business owner, you're taking on a lot more risk because you're starting a business. You're hiring those employees to work for you. You might have hundreds of employees underneath you as part of this business that's either providing a service or a product to the public. And the great thing about being a business owner is that if you set your business up properly and you have other people working for you, you can take a step back from your business. You could take a week or maybe a month off from your role, but you would still be making money, or the company would still be making money. Now, the fourth quadrant is the investor quadrant. And the investor quadrant could be anybody can be an investor. An investor is when you take money that you've earned and you put it to work in some type of an asset. So Robert Kiyosaki defined asset as something that makes you money. So you could take your hard-earned dollars and you could put it into any type of investment. That could be stocks, bonds, real estate, mutual funds. You could do a CD. You could do some type of insurance. There's many different things that you can invest in, and we're going to talk about those more in detail in other episodes. But the point is, as an investor, you put your money to work for you so that your money can be making you money when you're not putting the time in. So there's these four different quadrants, and we as individuals have a choice where we spend our time, what career we choose. And we like to be thinking about each of these and how we can apply those into our lives to gain financial freedom. So we also want to take a minute and talk about investing in a little bit more detail, because when you're talking about investing, you can invest for growth or you can invest for income. So if you were a younger individual and you had a longer time horizon before you needed a lot of passive income from your investments, it might be more wise to focus on growth investing, which means you might take a slightly higher risk so that you can get a slightly higher rate of return or reward for your investment. And if you have a higher return, you're able to grow your wealth faster so that when you get to a point in life where you need the income from your investments, you can switch and you can be investing for income. So there's a couple investments we'll talk about again more in detail, but you could invest in stocks that have dividends. You could invest in real estate that gives cash flow on a monthly or quarterly basis, so that you can be living off of the income produced from these investments. Now, we want to talk a little bit about an experience that Earl had. Didn't you coach for Robert Kiyosaki a few years ago?
I did. It was an incredibly great experience for me, and changed my life. I've always told people, if you can't teach a subject, you don't understand it well enough to. You don't fully understand a subject until you've actually had to teach it to somebody else. And so coaching for Kiyosaki was just an absolute godsend to me in changing my perspective on financial freedom. So I had a number of students that most of them came with very, very high hopes of getting out of the rat race on a really, really quick basis. I had one student, she was put into my schedule, and the very first 2 minutes of meeting with her, she said, we were talking about what she wanted to achieve. And she said, I asked them, and they promised that we could do this if I could get $50,000 a month of passive income through coaching. Well, anybody who knows anything about passive income, it's a fairly it's not the same as just buying, investing, right? Flipping houses, you get a lot of income, but it's not passive. When you're investing your dollars into something that produces cash flow, it actually takes quite a bit of investment to get that amount of passive income. And so I as a coach, you can't say, no, I can't help you achieve that. They'd go get a refund and I'd be out of a job. So I absolutely had to say, oh yeah, we can get you the $50,000 a month. The question is, how soon do you need that, right? Are you willing to put the work into it and be patient while that materializes? And she said, well, I need it in the next 6 weeks. And I was I can laugh about it now. Back then, I couldn't even laugh because I was afraid I'd offend the student. So I said, well, let me tell you exactly what it is that you're asking. I said, I can get you $50,000 a month in 6 weeks if you are completely prepared and ready to do that. And so the question I asked her was, how much, and I do this all the time when I'm explaining this to people, is for if you need $1,000 a month of passive income. Last week we talked a little bit about finding what your monthly nut is and how much do you need to get out of the rat race. Well, in this case, most people need $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month. That's what their focus is. That's what it costs them a month to live. Well, in this case, for a simple mathematical formula says that if I invest my money in an 8% cash on cash investment, something that pays me 8% per year, how much do I need to get $1,000 a month of passive income? And mathematically, it's about $150,000. And so, I said, we can get that, right? 50,000 it equates to about $7.5 million in cash invested at 8%. And I said, if you can turn over that 7.5 million in cash to me today, we absolutely can go find investments that'll pay you 8% rate of return, cash on cash. And he says, well, I don't exactly have the 7.5 million in cash. and I said, well, I didn't think so, but just in case, I wanted to make sure we could help you do that. I said, so really our focus needs to be on what are we going to do to help you get that 7.5 million in cash. And so we really have to start from where we're at. And so I said, let's set up a reasonable expectation of how long it would take you to do that. I said, there's an interesting statistic that if I was to take and put $7,500 today into a self-directed IRA, you could take that IRA, and once you have that money in it, you can self-direct that into almost anything. There's a few limitations, but we could certainly put it in real estate. The interesting thing about investing in real estate, not long-term cash flow, but if you're talking about investing in appreciation, flipping houses, for example, the average rate of return, if I'm flipping a home, is somewhere around 80 to 100% on the money I put in. Now, it's not perfectly passive because the reason you're getting such a high rate of return on that is because of you're contributing to it, right? It's partly your labor that's generating that high rate of return, but it's speculative. And people who are involved in flipping houses, Roger, you do quite a bit of that yourself, don't you?
Yep, I love to flip houses.
And your rate of return is 100% return achievable.
When you do it, you have a lot of different options. So if you use a hard money loan and get the leverage on there, and you count your material and contractor costs, you can definitely do about 100% return per flip.
Okay. And the point is, it's reasonable to assume that you could get that kind of rate of return. And that was my message to her. If you take $7,500 today and you get 100% rate of return, in other words, you're going to double that money every year. I said, so 7,500 becomes 15,000 next year. The year after, it's 30, and then it's 60. And in 10 years, you can end up with $7.5 million in your retirement account. At that point, none of it's passive. It's just a huge asset. But you literally could take and sell that you could take the cash and invest it into some sort of a cash flow type asset. You don't even have to leverage it at that point. You just put it into something that pays 8%. And that's really, really easy to do in the real estate, right? You just switched it from growing your assets to something more along the line of cash flow or passive income. And now you've got $50,000 a month for the rest of your life. And the cool thing is, you never have to, you never tap into the equity, right? That 7.5 million, you'll give it to your kids. Or if you're like me, and I always joke, people ask me, are you going to leave a legacy to your kids? I always joke, I say, I don't want to ruin my kids by leaving them a whole bunch of money. My goal is, I'm going to spend the last dime just 10 minutes before they put me in that pine box. So my kids don't appreciate that very much, but I, there's a way to get around that too. and that is you leave it in the trust, and people joke that's how you control your fortune from the grave to keep it from ruining your kids. But anyway, that's not really the issue. We're talking about getting people out of the rat race. And it is absolutely conceivable that if you put together a plan, you work through a self-directed IRA. And by the way, the reason that you have to do this in an IRA is because if you had to pay the taxes at the end of the year, in other words, you make the $15,000 1 year, you'd have to pay taxes on that money, and then it'd take you 25 years to achieve the same thing that you would achieve just by doing it tax deferred in a self-directed IRA. But anyway, it was a very interesting process, and it just illustrates how a couple of concepts, right? That it's absolutely achievable for the average person to end up with a whole lot of money, whether it's $7.5 million, whether you need $50,000 a month. Most of us probably need $8,000 to $10,000. And if we had that kind of money coming in, and if we were careful with what we spent, right, we could very, very easily retire, but that way.
So Earl, a couple of days ago, you and I have talked about these principles many times, and I was on Facebook looking at somebody's post, and somebody had put online that they needed to get $5,000 a month in passive income in 6 months, and their starting capital, they listed it, was $100,000. And I thought, these people got a long ways to go, because there's no way they're getting passive income at $5,000 a month starting out with $100,000. And that's one of the points of this podcast, is we're trying to help people understand what the numbers really look like so that they can start working towards that and really building their wealth so that they can have the passive income they need to support their lifestyle. Now, Earl, let's go back. You were talking a little bit about your experience coaching with Robert Kiyosaki, and I know you had a lot of success helping people there. Can you walk us through a little bit about like the process of what you were teaching those people and how you could help them really progress in their financial situation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had another interesting story. Most of the Kiyosaki students, and I coached there were a couple of different people that the same company represented all of Robert Kiyosaki's students. We also did Carlton Sheets students. And so, I get experience from, some of it was pure real estate. Some of it was more financial freedom, getting out of the rat race. But every one of my Kiyosaki students, almost all of them had exactly the same question, which was, hey, we've just spent, back then it was probably $8,000 or $10,000 for a 12-week coaching package. But hey, we've just spent all this money. And the big question we have is, can you get us out of the rat race? Well, again, if I said no, I'm a failure as a coach, and nobody's they're all going to go on to get a refund back. So the answer was always absolutely. And then the next question was always, well, listen, we're going to be coaching for the next 12 weeks with you. Sometimes it was 16, sometimes it was 8, but it was always a number. But they always wanted to know, we've just spent all this money. Can you get us completely out of the rat race in the next 12 weeks? And again, I at the time, I had to try hard not to laugh or even smile, because they'd probably hear the smile across the microphone. But I was pretty direct. Yeah, I can get you out of the rat race, absolutely. And yes, I can get you out of the rat race in the next 12 weeks. But the question is, will you do every single thing that I ask you to do? Well, it's like telling your kid, you're look, I could make you a millionaire in 6 weeks if you'll promise to do everything I ask. Your kid's gonna say, "Oh, absolutely, yeah, we'll do everything." And then I had him, and so it's all right. Let me tell you what we need. To get out of the rat race, the very first thing that you need to figure out is what's your monthly nut, right? How much does it cost for you to survive on a monthly basis. And so I said, tell me how much that is, so we know how much income we have to go generate for you. Well, almost invariably, the answer was, I'm not sure. It was almost shocking to me, right? You operate every week and you got enough money to go spend $10,000 to listen to someone like me kick you in the butt once in a while, and you don't know how much money that you don't know how much you spend, you don't know how much you bring in every month. How are you going to get out of the rat race? I wasn't quite that direct with them, but so the first thing is, you're going to come back next week, and I'm going to give you a budget and a balance sheet, and I'm going to make you come back, and we're going to talk about these, what it exactly is that you need. And so they'd go out and they'd bring them back the next week, and they'd send it to me a couple hours before so I could look at it, and review it with them. Well, and again, this is about coaching. It's about trying to motivate people to do something. And so sometimes you're a little bit hard on them, but we'd bring it back, and I'd open this thing up, and I'm looking at the balance sheet, and there's a motorhome, right? They just spent $150,000 for a big motorhome, and I'm like, you guys don't need a motorhome at this point. We got to sell the motorhome, right? It's going to save you, $1,200 or $1,500 a month or whatever the number was, right? So if we want to get out of the rat race quickly, we've got to make some hard choices, right? Then I'd look at they've got a BMW and a Mercedes or something, right? Wife drives the BMW, he drives the Mercedes. You don't need those expensive cars. We're going to have you sell those. We're going to save you another couple $1,000s a month, right? And we go down the list, and pretty soon I'd stripped it down to almost every asset that they had. Then we'd get to the house, right? And they've got some $800,000 house that they're paying $3,000 a month or $4,000, something like that. And in a lot of cases, the kids were gone, right? They had 3 bedrooms in the back, and nobody to stay in them. They've got 3 guest rooms now or something like that, in case the kids decided to stop by once in a while. All fine, but my comment was, you don't need that expensive of a house anymore. And so we're going to sell your house. They're like, oh my gosh, where am I going to live, man? What are we going to do? And I said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to buy you a 66 Volkswagen bus, the ones with the flowers on the side of it and all that kind of stuff. Nice, comfortable bed in the back. I said, we're going to have you park the bus down on the beach, and you're going to go fishing every day. And if you take half the fish and eat them, and the other half you're going to sell them for milk and bread. Well, of course, at that point they're like, "You're not serious, are you, Klein?" I'm, I said, "Look, I'm trying to help you guys get out of this as quickly as possible. Your 12-week, unless you want to go to that extreme, it's going to be difficult to get you out in 12 weeks. But if that's what you really want to do, I'll make the commitment to you that if you will be that aggressive about how you get out of the rat race, that what will happen is in probably 6 months, because you'll have all this time to work on the deal, you won't be wondering where the money's going to come from to pay your mortgage and your car payments and everything else. You'll be able to focus 100% on changing your financial outlook on life. And if you're willing to go to that extreme, it'll probably take 2 years. You'll end up right back here again with your house owned free and clear. You'll be looking to buy that boat or that motorhome again, or whatever it was that, and it'll take 2 or 3 years, but you'll have all of that stuff and it'll be paid for, right? And you will have started on an incredibly sound foundation. most people are not going to be willing to go to that extent to get themselves out of the rat race. If you go listen to most of the financial gurus out there, if you read one of Kiyosaki's books, I don't even remember which one it was, but he talks very specifically about living in a car for about 6 months, and then he moved into a relative's basement, right? Roger, you've listened to Tony Robbins a lot. He has a very similar story, doesn't he, about how his steps to financial freedom involve being virtually poor and almost living on the street. Is that right?
Yeah, Tony Robbins grew up with a mother raising him and no father, and it was really a desperate attempt in the early years. He got started with just gumption and started doing meetups that turned later into UPW, and the first one was just a real Hail Mary of a attempt at it.
So I don't seriously, I'm not seriously advocating that anybody sell their home and go live on a bus. I was joking with somebody last night. I was at a RIA club, and the gal was asking me about some steps that she needed to take. We got talking about Kiyosaki, and I illustrated a concept to her about it. And I said, I personally, I today, I still, there's a little trailer that I wanted to pull behind my motorcycle. I said, I could load the motorcycle and my trailer up, and I could easily spend 6 weeks on the road. Wouldn't bother me a bit, stop every once in a while, find a place to go take a shower. I could easily do it today. And my lifestyle is such over the last several years, I have been able to pay off almost every bit of debt that I have. The only thing I owe any money on is my home, and I intentionally don't pay that off because I like to keep it leveraged. I like that to continue to. It's a higher rate of return. But these guys have heard me joke all along. At this point in my life, all I need is $5 a week to fill the tank on my motorcycle up, and I'm happy as could be. So there is something to be said for how if you get yourself in a situation so that you can considerably reduce your monthly outgo, that you're going to get out of the rat race so much faster. And in my case, it's changed my whole perspective on life. Again, it's a joke, but I tell everybody my lifestyle today is I get up and flip a coin in the morning. Heads, I go riding. Tails, I have to come downstairs to my office, and except Ben, who's laughing over there because if I forget to do something, he's there with the sauna, nagging at me. Earl, you forgot to do this. You got to do this. But other than that, nobody else cares, unless it's something I forgot to do for my wife too. She'll make me get off my bike and come back and clean the kitchen or whatever I was supposed to do. Anyway, I'm just joking about all this. But the truth is, if you make that commitment to adjust your financial lifestyle, that it really does change your life. Today, I don't think I'm completely out of the rat race. We focused mostly on assets and accumulation of assets, and we're focusing on building a business so that, in a year or two, that business will completely run itself. So we're not quite there yet, but I could live for a long, long time on, with $10,000 in the bank. So
couple follow-up comments to your thoughts there, Earl. One thing I want to throw in, if you're not familiar with the term Earl used, a RIA club stands for a Real Estate Investors Association meeting. So that's something that all of us attend on a regular basis. I also wanted to say that Earl was talking quite a bit about debt management and planning for your financial future with your goals. We're going to be covering those two topics in more detail in future episodes. So make sure to tune in for that. And I wanted to summarize, just to clarify, Earl spent quite a bit of time talking about the people he was coaching, and that they needed to sell off all of their fun things, or whatever you want to call them, so that they could get to a place of financial freedom. And he also brought it back that we're not advising you to do that. What we are advising is, and this is what Robert Kiyosaki talks about with his definition of assets and liabilities, focusing on buying assets before you buy liabilities, and have your assets pay for your liabilities. So if you have a goal to have a boat or a motorhome or something like that, in the long run, you'll be much better off delaying the purchase of that and taking the money you have right now and investing it in something that will continue to build your wealth. And when you get to a point that the wealth you've started to create for yourself is paying you, take the income you get from your wealth and use it to buy toys if that's what you choose to do. Or you can use it to continue to grow your wealth. You have a lot of options, but we're definitely not saying don't buy toys. We're saying to do it in the correct order so that you can build your wealth and truly become financially free.
Hey, Ben, really a quick follow-up to that. I was in Robert Kiyosaki. Robert used to come and speak to the coaches about once a quarter. He'd come rent a room, and we'd get to ask him questions and stuff like that. And the story he used to illustrate that was just I love the story. He said he sold some sort of a real estate asset. He had about $100,000 in cash, and he decided it was time to get a new car. And he joked with us. He says, I don't look good in a cheap car. And so he had to go buy a new Porsche, and he had just enough cash to go buy the Porsche. And he said, so rather than do that, he went and invested it in some sort of an apartment complex. He took the cash flow off of that apartment complex, which was probably $1,500 a month or something like that. He was able to go buy the Porsche, use the cash flow from the apartment to pay for the Porsche. He said 5 years later, the Porsche was paid for. He still had it. He still had the apartment complex. It had gone up in value and was spinning off even more cash than he had. And it's just a different way of looking at it, right? Instead of taking your assets and buying toys with them, it's taking your assets and converting them to income producing assets that you can then use those to support your toys, so to speak.
That's a great example, Earl. Great story. And let's talk about how we can try to internalize some of these principles, because a lot of what we're talking about right now might seem a little bit big picture or hard to grasp for some people. So Robert Kiyosaki also created a board game called Cash Flow. And I'm hoping Roger will talk to us a little bit about the game Cash Flow, because it really is a good teaching tool of the principles that we're discussing here. And you can, when you play this game, you can understand what needs to happen in your real life so that you can truly build wealth. Roger, have you played the game Cash Flow?
Yeah, Cash Flow is a really fun game. It's something that I've enjoyed with my sons and family members. It's very similar to Monopoly, but it also has a really deep mindset that it will create. When you play it, you have two different sections. During the first time, you're having kids and you have a job. And when you get to a point where your passive income pays for your monthly expenses, you go to the second part of the game. So you can choose different jobs, or you randomly pick a job. You see what your monthly costs are, and you go around determining whether or not you want to buy certain assets. As the game progresses, you have chances to sell, and it really is a valuable tool in helping you to understand in a quick, short version, what you need to do in your life to get to that passive income out of the rat race time.
Now, one thing I want to bring up is regardless of who you are, unless you inherited a bunch of money somehow, all of us start out with some type of a career. We're either going to be, going back to the cash flow quadrant, we're either going to be an employee for somebody, we're going to be self-employed, or we're going to be a business owner of some type in order to start producing income for ourselves. And in the game cash flow, everybody starts off with a career. Now, Earl likes to talk about his selection of career choice in the game cash flow, because you might think that, let's give you some examples. So in the game cash flow, a couple of the career choices are a janitor. Another one is an attorney. Another is a doctor. I'm blanking on the other ones, but there's a wide spectrum of different career choices you can have in this game. And you might think, well, I'm going to go for the person who makes the most money in the game, right? Because you think if they're making the most money, that would be the easiest to do this game. Earl, do you want to talk about your selection of career choice in cash flow?
Absolutely. My kids used to come over at Christmas time, New Year's or whatever. Hey, Dad. Hey, in fact, sometimes they even do. Most of they still come back and the dad. Remember when we used to have those great games of cash flow? Let's get the game out and let's just see how we do. Well, they used to get so frustrated because Dad always won, and they could never figure out why it was that I always won. Well, it's because they'd pick the doctor, the nurse, the attorney, whatever. Oh, this guy makes all this money, but he also had a ton of debt. So that meant that there's that many more investments that he had to acquire in order to cover the mound of debt that, the student loans, all those kind of things that they acquired. And I almost always picked the janitor. The guy had no debt. He made, minimum wage, I think. But all we had to do was pick a couple of good small investments, trade those in for a big investment, and I was completely out of the rat race in a very, very short period of time. And my kids were always like, "Dad, how do you do that? You're cheating. I know you are." So, but that's the concept, right? It's not that you can't make a lot of money, but it's if your decision to make a lot of money incurs a lot of debt and a lot of expenses, then it's going to take you longer to get yourself out of the rat race. And so that focus on whatever you can do to eliminate as much of that monthly nut that you have to pay in the beginning when you're getting started is going to make it that much faster for you to succeed with that idea of getting yourself financially free.
Another point I learned from that, Earl, is that it doesn't really matter where you are in life. You could be an employee, self-employed, business owner. It doesn't really matter. If you're not tracking your expenses and you're looking at what it is that you need every month and ways to reduce that and assets you can purchase to increase your wealth, if you're not focusing on that, it'll take a long time before you can really gain financial freedom. Or you could flip that and say, if you do focus on it, you'll be able to obtain it much quicker. And that's one of the things we're trying to help with this podcast, is to teach people about just the foundational things you can be doing right now so that you can build your wealth faster and truly become financially free. Now, all of us on this podcast are still working towards true financial freedom, but Roger recently took a step to get much closer. I believe he sold a property he had and reinvested a little bit. Roger, are you willing to share a little bit about that experience with us?
Sure. So I have lived in a house that I've owned all my life. About 2.5 years ago, I was in a house for 19 years in Cottonwood Heights, Utah. The house had gone from $159,000 up to almost $500,000. And, through the years, there were some different changes and a refinance. But at the end, I was able to sell my house, and I could have downsized, but I actually went to a larger house and bought in a completely different community, moved to Pleasant Grove, Utah. And the house this time was much bigger, but my vision on it was to also have a mother-in-law apartment in it that I could rent. And as things progressed and I learned more, I also found out that I could do it as a short-term rental where I rented on Airbnb or VRBO. And with the seller finance contract that I bought the house with and the income that comes off of the Airbnb tenants, I'm actually living for free and making money on my living expenses. So that's one of the things I've done to, get closer to being out of the rat race.
So when I'm listening to both of you guys, it sounds like you're focusing on reducing your monthly expenses so that you can be getting much closer to financial freedom, which is the point that Robert Kiyosaki talks about in the book. Reduce your liability, increase your assets so that your assets can cover or create passive income for you and that you can live off of that. Am I understanding that right, Roger?
Absolutely. The first thing you want to do is get rid of the high cost depreciating assets and invest in assets that will appreciate.
Great points. So
Roger, you and I both have, we both joke about, we show up to the RIA club and drive off in, 15, 20-year-old trucks, right?
Yeah.
It cracks me up because, I know in my situation, I could go pay cash for a brand new truck, and I keep looking at them, but I haven't yet. I did acquire several new motorcycles the last little while, but they're all paid for too. But anyway, it's just a different perspective that we could probably afford the brand new truck. But one of
the problems with what you're saying right now, Earl, is we want our podcast to be evergreen. And I really like those GMC Denali HDs, the blacked out one, the lift kit, the big tires. So we probably shouldn't talk too much about our old trucks, because one day I might just accidentally stop at the dealership and end up with a brand new one. Well, I'll probably buy it 2 years old, because I hate that first step when you drive over the curb and gutter and you leave the lot and it depreciates 20%. So maybe a 2-year-old one. I'll find one day.
We need to summarize this episode. What do we think should be the main points? Obviously, we're paused for a second here.
It goes without saying that we've talked about a big theme in Warren Buffett's career, and that is delayed instant gratification. We definitely should talk about growing our assets and being value investors and minimizing our expenses.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to our episode today. Just as kind of a summary on the things we've talked about, there's a really main point that we want to drill home is delayed instant gratification, because even if you have the cash right now to go out and buy all these toys or whatever it is that you're interested in, going back to Earl's story about the Porsche that Robert Kiyosaki bought, waiting and buying investments so that your investments can pay for your liabilities is the best way to help create financial freedom for yourself. And also summarizing, growing your assets with value investments. So finding investments today that can produce a slightly higher rate of return so that you can grow your wealth faster. Also, minimizing your expenses, because the less expenses you have, the less passive investments you need to really be financially free. Reducing debt is another important piece. We're going to talk more in detail about that in some future episodes. And we talked quite a bit today about tracking your monthly expenses and putting together a balance sheet for yourself. So we're going to put in the show notes a template that you can download so that you can look at your current financial situation and figure out how you can get more on track with becoming financially free. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about different types of passive investments and how you can use those to your advantage so that you can obtain financial freedom and get out of the rat race sooner. So make sure to tune in next week when we talk about different types of passive investments and how those can help your life. So we hope to have you back with us next week. Until then, have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Retire Wealthy and Happy podcast.
hope you got value from this episode. And if you have a minute, then take the time to leave an honest written review for the podcast, because we take those reviews seriously and it'll help us serve you better on the next episodes. And most importantly, be sure to start taking action so you can control your financial future today.